So our scripture today is found in the book of Mark. We're going to look at Mark chapter 2. We're going to be looking at verses 23 to 28, which is the end. There is 28. Sometimes those numbers get really small, right? I just know we're going to the end, right? 23 to the end. And really, this is just a text we're using to jump off to talk about a topic, one that is kind of important, and one that is timely because tomorrow is Labor Day, right? And Labor Day is a holiday that was started because of the trade unions in America felt that the workers needed a day of rest. Well, we're going to be talking today about the Sabbath, which was a day of rest. Okay? So let's look at Mark chapter 2, starting in verse 23. All right? One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" He answered, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate that consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, 'The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is the Lord even of the Sabbath.'" And so as we look at this passage, there are some things to note about this passage. The people who are concerned here they're really not concerned with the Sabbath itself. They're more concerned with trying to catch Jesus. To trying to say, "Look, Jesus, you're screwing up. Ha ha." Right? They want to find fault in him. And they're constantly looking for fault in him. These are the same people, if we jumped over to Luke chapter 14, the same people who, when he is about to heal a paralytic man on a Sabbath, are going to get angry for him healing the man. Right? And so Jesus will ask them, "Look, which one of you, if your horse or your donkey falls in a well," he said donkey, falls in a well, wouldn't actually rescue him on the Sabbath? Just because it's the Sabbath, you don't just stop taking care of people, right? So they were trying to catch him, trying to say, "Oh, you did this wrong, you screwed up, you broke the law." Right? And so they're wondering, why are your disciples, why are you letting them do that? You must be wrong here. And so to understand this to some extent, we can look at Exodus. I have Exodus 31 here where the Sabbath was explained in the law. This is way back in Exodus, right? So in Exodus 31, here's the establishment of the Sabbath. "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, 'Speak also to the children of Israel, saying, Surely my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. You shall keep the Sabbath, therefore it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death.'" So you can look at this and go, look, if they caught Jesus in the Sabbath, breaking the Sabbath, they can say, "Oh, the consequences of that is death, so we get to take you out," right? So the consequence, anyone who profanes this will be put to death. "For whoever does any work on it, that person shall be cut off from among his people. Work shall be done for 6 days, but the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Therefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations, as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed." And so we have the establishment of the Sabbath, and it says that anyone who does any work on the Sabbath, they're going to get put to death. They'll be cut off from the family and kicked out of Israel and left for dead. So that leaves a question for us. It really leaves a question, and the Jewish people had this question. Well, then, how do we define work? What constitutes work? You know, if it means you break a sweat, well, I've been in trouble the last several weeks because as soon as it hits 80 degrees out, actually when it gets above 75, I start sweating. So I must be working. My body's working, right? Well, clearly it can't be that because I can do that laying on the ground sweating profusely. All right? So clearly that can't be work. So they start to try to figure out what is work, and picking the grain, that must be work because, you had to do something. All right? Going out, they would start parsing this and going, well, how many steps may I take in a day before it's constituted as work? Right? I know some people wear 2,000 steps in a day. Anything past that's work for them, right? So how do we constitute work? Well, they said, well, maybe it's not the amount of steps you take in a day. Maybe it's how far from home you go. All right? So you shouldn't travel because traveling is really kind of work. As I said yesterday, we came back from Buffalo. We went up to see my grandmother, and that 3.5-hour drive, that was kind of some work. We got on the road, and Sarah's like, you can't just go pick up the dogs because you haven't stopped to let us go potty. You got to let us out at the house, right? Because it was work. So the Jewish people, they had established, well, you can go this far from the house. Well, what constitutes home, right? Home is where the heart is, isn't it? So they started saying, well, yeah, but if I have anything from that house, I can go this far. And so they would go and they would set down like a chair. And then they would go that far from the chair and set down another thing. And they would find ways around to break their own laws. When all God said was, he who does any work. And he kind of left that idea of work up in the air. Up in the air. It's ambiguous. It's an ambiguous concept of what really constitutes work. He doesn't come down and say, here's what work is. Because really, we know we should be able to judge when we're overdoing it, right? Phyllis is telling us she overdid it just by going to a wedding yesterday, right? We got to listen to our bodies, and we gotta feel for what work really is, right? And so the Sabbath really, as he says here, the Sabbath was established for man. It was established for you and me. Right? It was established on the basis, back in Exodus, that God created the world in 7 days, or 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. Now the reality is, God doesn't need to rest. He's omnipotent. He's all powerful. He could create the world in 6 days without breaking a sweat. For him, that 80-degree weather, that's nothing. Right? Sarah's frowning. Gary, 80 degrees is nothing. That's when it's comfortable out. No, it's too hot. Right? But the reality is that God didn't need to rest. He rested because we need rest. He rested because, as a good teacher does, he was modeling behavior. As parents do for their kids, We model the behavior. We say, hey, this is what we want you to act like, and so you can watch me do this, and this is how it's going to be. We were picking sweet corn, and look, the girls were trying to husk the corn. It's like, well, this is how you husk it. Turns out that the way I husk corn, the girls can't do it. They just don't have the physical strength. It's just taking and just ripping in half. And so you go, okay, let's show you another way. Let's model it. Well, God was modeling the fact that you and I, we need a day of rest. We need to take time out of our busy schedules. We need to find a way of saying, oh, no, I need a chance to rest. We need a break. Ooh, we go. And it turns out in our culture here in America, we're really bad at taking that rest. We're really bad at saying, you know what? I can't do anything today. I need to just sit down and just veg out. Right? Right? We're bad at that. And we are so bad at that in America. When we see somebody sitting down and resting, we go, wow, that guy's lazy. They're they don't do anything. Well, sometimes there are lazy people out there, and we want to make sure that we're not lazy either. right? But there is a time to say, all right, my work is done. We had a person come up for professional development at the school, and one of the things the lady noted was teachers are notorious for taking all their work home and spending all their time in the evening and on the weekends still doing their work. And she said, look, you guys, you need to realize that you can't keep that pace up. It leads to burnout. It's why so many people are dropping out. And I'm thinking, well, teachers have been doing this forever. They're not dropping out because of that. They're dropping out because the system's broken, and they're seeing that. But the reality is, we need a time where we say, I got to rest. I got to take a break from this. And we need to do that physically. Physically, and sometimes we recognize, hey, physically we need to rest. Last week I went to the 75th anniversary for Pathfinder, and we walked up the big hill there. And I'm not in as good of a shape as I once was. I'm in the worst shape of my life probably. And we're going up the hill, and it's like physically I knew I needed to rest. And so I sat down and he said, are we going to find you here when we come back? And I said, no, I'll catch up to you guys. I'll catch up. Right? Because physically my body said you need a rest. But the reality is sometimes mentally we need to take a break. We need to just think of other things. We need to put other things on our mind and say, you know what, God? We're going to think of other things. Help us to remember the happy things. Help us to remember the pleasant things, the lovely things, And whatever things are beautiful, whatever things are lovely, think on those, right? Mentally, we need a rest. And sometimes spiritually, we need a rest. Sometimes spiritually, we need to say, hey, God, these things have been troubling me. They've been troubling me in my soul. They've been bothering me. And Lord, I need to hand them over to you. And then we need to actually step away from them. This is one of those hard things because there are some things in our life that we don't know how to step away from. But the reality is, we can't do it on our own. We can't just keep going in 100% every day of every day of every hour, because the bigger goes into the little, right? We can't do it every hour of every day. I was talking with my father yesterday. He's like, it's funny. We sleep like a third of our lives away. And then I was thinking about my nephews who sleep like over half their life away because they go to bed at like 2 in the morning and they wake up at 3 in the afternoon. That's more than half the day. Right? We sleep so much, and yet we still need a day of rest because we cannot do it all on our own. Right? And so we need to have a Sabbath. That Sabbath is necessary. But I want you to see something that was in that Exodus passage that we looked at. Right? Not only is the Sabbath a necessary thing for us physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, but it's also a sign, according to Exodus, right? He says it actually twice here. He says it in verse 13, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you know, or that you may know, that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. All right? And then, again, a little bit later on down, in verse 17, it is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. Right? It's a sign of what? Well, it's a sign that God is our God. It's a sign that God sanctifies us. Right? That God is the one who takes care of us. And so as we look at that question of, well, how do I let go? How do I step back? How do I learn to relax and rest? Well, the answer is to recognize that we need to trust that God is in control of things. And he may not do things in our time, Well, God, that thing that I've been praying for all week, the thing that I've been burdened with, and for some of us, for all year, right? You haven't fixed it yet. And you know what? Give it time. I'm in control. You've given it to me already. Let me have it. Right? God, the field still needs to be plowed. right? Find some physical activity. God, it still needs to get done. How do I stop? Well, the reality is, it'll be okay. God's in charge. God's got control of it. Now, there's that flip side of you don't want to be lazy, right? You'll notice our field didn't get weeded this year. It's not because we were lazy. I want to point this out. It's not because we were lazy. It's because we weren't home, right? Because Sarah finally let me say, let's go places. Let's do things. Let's see the world. And so we saw the libraries, right? It took time. But at some point, the work needs to get done too. We need to find the balance between the work getting done and finding rest. We need, as a people, to recognize that our willingness to have rest is a sign of God and us. We also need to recognize that when God calls us to do something, we need to go out and do it. Right? There's that balance. And so in our passage here, we have the disciples who are on the Sabbath day picking some grain. Are they working? Well, they're putting food in their mouths. They're not harvesting the wheat. They're not out there with a sickle and trying to. They're picking a little bit and eating it. They're. You know, if putting food in your mouth is working, man, I should be thinner than thin, right? That's a great work. My arms should be so buff. Just pick up the hamburger, you put it in your mouth, you set it down. Pick it up, you put it in, you set it down. I pick things up, I put them down. Right? That's not work. They weren't breaking the Sabbath. They weren't stopping the rest. They were just eating. They were living life. But they were still taking that time to rest. And the reality is that they were with the Master. And you know what? If the Master says, you know what, today we got some stuff to do, you'll rest tomorrow. He can do that. He can do that. The recognition of this idea of the Sabbath, where is the rest found? Right? We read earlier for our call to worship, Matthew. Where is the rest found? The rest is found in Jesus. The true Sabbath is found in resting in Him. And finding ourselves in Him. And so it's important for us to recognize that we need a Sabbath. The disciples, they found it in Him. They found it in that relationship. You know, they did what He told them to do. And when He told them to, they stopped and they relaxed. And we see that. Multiple times we see that. And we see sometimes when they were supposed to be relaxing and they couldn't. Right? They couldn't because they were too busy. Instead of focusing on that relationship they have with Him, they were looking at the world around them and going, how in the world is He sleeping in this? Right? You remember when they were on the boat and the thunder was coming down and the waves were tossing and Jesus is asleep in the boat? You know, this is why I love Jesus. He sleeps through anything. Right? And according to my wife, so do I. Right? So I'm like Jesus in one regard. And they go, how do you rest like that? How do you relax through that? Well, he knew it was okay. He knew the Master. His relationship with the Father was perfect. And had they been focused on who was in the boat with them, had they recognized that relationship, their rest would have been complete too. Right? And so here when we look at them in Mark, and they're picking the grain and they're eating it, their rest is not found in the absence of picking things, but their rest is found in the relationship they have with the Son of Man, who is Lord even of the Sabbath, who gives us rest when we come to Him. And so, I know I'm tired. I don't think I'm the only one who's tired. And I think it's important for us to remember that we need to go to God and find some rest. And you know what? He's there saying, take it. The victory is ours through Him. He set the example. So let's follow Him in taking a Sabbath. So tomorrow, if you don't have to go to work, enjoy a day of rest. Okay? Enjoy a day of rest. It's all right. Will you bow with me in prayer?